Hello, everyone. My name is Lucy Stonehill. I will be moderating the panel we have here today. And in this session, we will explore how three leading industry operators think about how to prepare the workers of today for the world of tomorrow. We're thrilled to be here with you, and we're very excited to be shedding light on what we all believe is a very, very important topic, and one that we won't probably answer all the questions that pertain to, but we'll hopefully ask a few very important ones. Part of which is asking the question, how do we effectively bridge the education to career gateway for different stages and phases and ages of learner and professional? And indeed, how can education serve as a springboard for career pathways and the job skill fit in today's economy? We'll also touch on workforce planning and the transition from college to career. We'll debate the complexities of designing progression pathways for different stages of employment. And we'll be asking the question, is the art of learning itself the most valuable skill of them all? Without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce you to our three fantastic panelists, Lydia Liu, Sarah Smirnoff, and Allison Horn, who will now introduce themselves for a brief second before we get into the discussion. Let's start with you, Lydia.
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, everyone. I'm Lydia Liu. I'm a Principal Research Director at ETS. I came from China to the States in 2001 in pursuit of graduate studies. My doctoral training was in educational measurement and statistics. I joined ETS in 2006, and a lot of my research has focused on assessment and training of critical skills and competencies important for both academic and workforce purposes, particularly around the transferable interpersonal and intrapersonal skills. Very happy to be here today and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Lydia. Sarah, let's hear from you.
Hi, thank you, Lucy. I'm Sarah Smirnoff, Executive Director of New Product Development here at ETS, and I come with a lot of experience in product development, started in K-12 education reform, really spent a lot of time looking at K-12 product development, have also worked in higher ed product development, and now very focused on thinking about skills for the workforce and how we create products that can bridge from education all the way into work.
Thanks, Sarah. And finally, Allison.
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Horn. I have the privilege of serving as our Global Head of Talent for Accenture. And in that role, I work with teams across our business and ecosystem partners to continuously enhance our recruiting, onboarding, learning, leadership development, and performance channels. So super happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks very much, everyone. So let's kick off with you, Lydia. As you mentioned, your background is in research, K-12, teaching, learning, assessment, higher education, as well as, of course, what we're here to talk about today, workforce planning. Could you give us a high-level overview, really, of the changes that you've seen that are broadly underway in this space and sector, and what themes you think are most important for us to highlight and sort of draw out during this discussion?
Sure, Lucy. So we are observing a number of trends. First, there is the dual track of educational training emerging, because in the past, the higher ed institutions were solely responsible for providing education. Now we are seeing a lot of big corporates entering the education and training space. For example, last year, Google announced that they're going to sponsor the Google certificates, which cost $49 a month and about 6 months to complete in a number of high demand domains. I think that's a response to the fact that employers are not happy with the pace at which talents are being prepared or the qualifications of new hires. So the first trend is really we're going to see this dual track. And in this dual track model, institutions and employers are going to be both competitors and partners, because a lot of the content generated for corporate training comes from higher ed institutions. Another trend is the once linear education to career transition is becoming very non-linear. We have a lot more people who are earning a degree while working full-time, or working as apprentices while being in a degree program. We also have individuals going to a boot camp to gain necessary technical skills rather than enrolled at a traditional 2 or 4 year institution. And employers at the same time are also investing heavily in tuition reimbursement programs. The last trend I want to mention is really the development of AI. It's shortening the life cycle of skills. Many tasks can be automated, and it's really the ones that involve human judgment, creativity, and interaction that are less likely to be replaced by machines. And that's why a lot of companies are now asking for what they call the workforce skills or power skills, in addition to technical ones, things like teamwork, adaptability, collaboration. So these are the few general trends I wanted to mention, and I will be happy to talk a little bit more about them later.
Thanks, Lydia. I'm sure we will get into a number of those items a little bit later. And just to say to my fellow panelists here, obviously feel free to chime in throughout, as I'm sure you have fantastic things to add. Sarah, let's come to you next. So you are a relative newcomer to ETS. Your background, as you mentioned, is in education reform as well as ed tech, across the sort of K through to sort of learner and in fact now sort of professional learner spectrum. And one of the things I think is really interesting about talking to you is that you really are a product person at heart, and you think very much from that perspective. Something we spoke about prior to this session is how designing learner and professional transitions is very, very hard, right? And in fact, designing choice architecture that allows for people to evaluate their options and plan for their futures is really tough stuff. It's not simple to do at all. Can you talk a little bit about that, Sarah, about your your background, your approach to that sort of broad challenge with your kind of product and design thinking hat on?
Absolutely. Where, the challenge is a little bit like we saw when I was working in K-12, right? Where you always had to think about this two-sided user-buyer relationship, where you always thought about, here are the folks that need to use this or benefit from it, and they're different paths, and then you have the buyers on another side. This is kind of takes that and almost makes it into 6 or 7 levels, where you have the industries that are stakeholders, you have the users, the individuals themselves, you have the higher education institutions, as well as the government, all needing to really play a role, and all who really are thinking about, I need to make a change, I need to get value, I need to make sure what I'm doing and my needs are met. And so when you're looking at it from a product perspective, you're really thinking about, well, what are the motivations for each of these groups? What are the value that we can think about? And how do you create a product, or how do you create really a solution that is so multi-tiered and so multi-sided that you can actually create that value on all sides? And so when you're thinking about the innovations that need to happen, it's on the actual content, it's on the interactions and the user experience, and it's also on the financial models that need to shift, because we're really looking at creating really different pathways, really different ways of onboarding people into their pipeline, getting ways for industry to really think about, hey, there's a whole group of people that I haven't had access to, and that could be a solution to the problem that I'm having. So it's a really interesting, it's a really exciting time, but a lot of challenges when you're thinking about how do you do this with so many at the same time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. And Allison, as you mentioned, you've been at Accenture for over 20 years. And if Wikipedia is up to date, Accenture employs a remarkable 537,000 individuals. I'm sure that is that's probably even more than when you last updated Wikipedia. As you mentioned, you run the global talent practice at Accenture with responsibility across recruitment, onboarding, learning, leadership development, and you're also the chief learning officer with a very large team that's supporting you and your leadership team with thinking through learning guidance. Can you talk a little bit about your own experience and the evolution that you've seen over the course of your career in how Accenture really thinks about talent from the employment angle, and perhaps with a focus on how your employer practices have changed over the years, and also adding on a third bullet to that question, where ultimately you see the future for Accenture in this regard?
Sure. So Wikipedia is not quite up to date, but quite frankly, depending upon whether you're seeing this today or 2 weeks from now, those numbers are constantly changing. I think we're somewhere around 560,000 people at this point. We hire, give or take, 100,000 people every year. So this concept of finding talent, onboarding talent, getting people productive, making sure they have this continuous talent development opportunity at Accenture. This is an everyday, every hour thought for us. I mean, at the end of the day, we are a people company, as any professional services company would be. We don't have products, so to speak. Our products are our people. So this whole concept of finding talent and really helping to create meaningful careers for people, it's the very core of who we are and what we do. As you mentioned, I have been at the company for more than 20 years. I started in our consulting practice, moved into this more internal facing role about 15 years ago. And when I look back at, how have things changed since I've been paying attention in those roles, I think the single biggest change, I go back 15 years ago, and we were able to put almost everybody at the company through the same development channels. Everyone, got off the proverbial school bus, if you will, came from campus, came to our, our boot camps, our, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 3-month programs, maybe, depending upon which areas you were going into. But everybody did that. And then everybody joined their projects. And then everybody took the same training as they got promoted here, here, and here. Fast forward to today, and that model does not work for us anymore. It hasn't worked for us for many years. We've stepped away significantly from it. What we do today is build a backbone, if you will, of robust learning programs that can operate at scale, that our people can navigate their way through, so that regardless of where I sit in the organization, what career level I'm at, I can find the learning programs I need that are most relevant for me at that moment. And we've also moved away from what I now call our just in case training world, right? We're going to train you on all these things just in case you might need them. The world is moving too fast. There's too many things for us to even put into this just in case category. So really moving more into a just in time model where, as I come across a problem or I'm asked to, see a new opportunity through, if I don't know what I'm doing, I can find the training I need just in time to be able to do that. I can engage in the training, whether it's digital, whether it's in classroom, whatever it might look like. And then I can very quickly apply that on my project, apply it on my job where, as we all know from the standpoint of what makes learning stick the most, being able to apply, being able to get into that trial and error mode is going to be the most powerful there. So, in terms of yesterday to today, going from a one size fits all to a one size fits one model. And in terms of tomorrow, just with the pace of what is changing and even being in this just in time learning mode, being able to learn quickly. We talk about learning agility, that ability to be able to learn. Lydia, you were talking about the power skills that employers are looking for. For us, that ability to learn and learn quickly is the number one power skill we care about, because we feel like everything else can follow from there. So to me, that's the future piece, how we really get that power skill of learning right.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Allison. And Sarah and Lydia, I'm going to bring you both in a second here, but just as a sort of follow-on question, Allison, there's plenty I'd love to sort of pick apart in what you said. So, fascinating to hear what you were saying about just in case and just in time learning. But as an employer, in order to even develop those programs, you must have a sense of defining your talent strategy overall. And in fact, being able to sort of foresee or forecast what the talent needs of the organization are in the future. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you think about that sort of talent strategy at Accenture. And I think particularly when we spoke, you talked about sort of two categories, one of which is identifying sort of gaps that you might need to fill through hiring, but also identifying opportunities to reskill or upscale individuals within the organization. And specifically, we spoke about how your very large talented team of sort of guidance and sort of learning designers have developed a skills taxonomy as a tool or piece of critical infrastructure to help guide that thinking. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and then Sarah and Lydia, would love to have you both sort of chime in on this important question as well.
Be happy to. So let me start with skills. Skills are the backbone of what we do. The skills taxonomy, I always describe the skills taxonomy as probably one of the least sexy things we do. It's a behind the curtain scene. It's this constant job of making sure we have the list right. And again, I know there's nothing exciting about that, right? Getting a list right. But when your list tops over 8,000 skills and you're working at the scale that we work, and you have all these ecosystem partners, and the way we talk internally has to be the same as the way our partners talk externally, and the way our candidates think in terms of their skills, there is a little bit of art, a little bit of science, and a whole lot of elbow grease that goes into getting that skills list right. So with skills as the backbone of the company and of our talent practices, we then step forward to our people and say, look, skills are the currency to opportunities here. They are the currencies that get you a job here in the first place. They're the opportunities that get you on the most exciting projects, or projects that are in alignment with where you want to go next. Skills are the first thing we're going to look at, skills you have and skills you aspire to have. Maybe skills you don't aspire to have, but you need. Those gaps are going to help to dictate learning paths and where you need to go next. So skills as the backbone for sure, skills as the backbone across each and every one of our talent practices. And, there's just no way to overstate how important it is to get that structure right. But at the same time, nobody can work in the language of 8,000 skills. There are certain areas we need to go, really granular on, and that's impossible to ever get your head around a catalog like that. So as many employers do, we also have to create shortcuts to that taxonomy for our people. We use a vernacular of specialization. We put groups of skills together and look and say, hey, you might be interested in becoming specialized in agile, so to speak, right? Well, agile is a collection of about 400 skills, right? We're going to pick the most important 7 to 10 and say, this is what you need to go big on. We were talking earlier as well about the role that technology plays here. We are constantly investing in the AI solutions to be able to help bridge that shortcut of the skills you have, the skills you aspire to, therefore, what learning program should you take? I intentionally use the words constantly investing and aspiring because we're not there yet. Personally, I don't think there's any technology solution that is there yet, but I am super optimistic that we're going to get there. I'm super optimistic that someday we are going to have all the pieces ticked and tied. These are the skills that we're talking about. These are the assessments that we're using to help you understand where the gaps are. These are the solutions that can very quickly and easily spit out meaningful learning paths for you, guidance for you. And then it's just, you're on your way. You're accessing these catalogs, you're, jumping into these scaled programs and going from there.
Fantastic.
Lucy, I forgot what else I was supposed to talk about, but
no, I think you actually you kind of covered it really, Allison. Fantastic. Sarah, Lydia, anything to add from your side?
I just wanted to add that when we think about the skills, I definitely agree with what Allison just said. It's a vast list or a repertoire of ideas and skills and competencies, and it's really unrealistic for us to capture all of that. But I think we can use broader categories of competencies and taxonomy to convey the information to two important stakeholders, the individuals and education programs. In our own research, when we conduct interviews with employers, and we found that sometimes across different sectors and job categories, they use the same term, but the underlying meaning or definition is very different. So in that case, when people say that I want more collaboration skills or communication skills, it would work best if we can have employers clearly articulate those definitions, and especially what those skills mean in their specific work context. So education providers will take that information and weave into their curriculum design and campus or online training. And our individual learners or students will have the opportunity to help promote their awareness and also get the necessary training on that. I also wanted to add that for the ones who are currently with an employer, they have the exposure to workforce training, and that's really great. But there are also a lot of people who are between jobs or out of employment. We have a talent crisis in this country at this point. By the end of April, I think we had like 9 million people who were out of jobs. But at the same time, we had like 9 million open positions. The discrepancy is really because employers cannot find people with the right skill sets. I think career and technical education programs are a great way to help alleviate the talent shortage. There are a lot of great programs that are out there. For example, some of the non-credit programs, they are shorter, they're faster, they cost not so much, and they can respond quickly to employer needs because they're less regulated. So the thing is really how to get our individuals and students to know that they have options. I think it's also an equity question, because sometimes the ones who are most vulnerable are the ones who are least informed. So in our own research, we're trying to look at the misalignment between students' perception and awareness and the real workforce opportunities. And we see a big gap. For example, there are a lot of jobs in logistics and health professions right now, and those are relatively high-paying jobs, but very small percentages of students enroll in those programs, which creates a missed opportunity for those students. Typically, they are first-generation or minority students or students speaking English as a second language. So as we think about the entire ecosystem of how to move more people into higher security, higher paying jobs, we really have to think about the right support to get them into the programs, not just to focus on the quality of those programs.
I'm really glad you raised that, Lydia. And in fact, I think let's spend a bit more time on that topic and on the topic of the opportunity gap as you defined it. Sarah, one thing that we spoke about before is whether there is a kind of risk. I mean, what's unusual about this conference in this year is that it's been, for most markets, it's been a record year in capital raised and innovation. We've obviously seen, prompted by 2020, events of 2020, a kind of surge in value being placed on innovation and technology across the kind of learning to workforce sort of segments. Do you think, there is a risk that with all this kind of continued enthusiasm and in fact capital, there's a risk that, we continue to make progress, those of us who, are in a position to do so, but that we don't focus enough on how to actually shrink that achievement gap? As Lydia was saying, one topic and one concept that you introduced me to, which I thought was particularly powerful, was how do we include invisible populations in this discussion? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on exactly that topic.
Yeah, there's a huge risk in leaving entire swaths of folks behind with this, in terms of thinking about how people are coming up into their adult world, right? And they're coming from a K-12 system that isn't equitable to start, and then they're coming into not being able to get into the colleges and not having the skills yet to really help them succeed in these programs or succeed in any of these credential programs at this point. And what we like to do, or what I think we see the trend a lot, is really this focus so much on the technology skills, so much on these power skills as well, which are there. But if you don't have the right foundational skills as well, literacy, numeracy, you're not going to be at a point where you can start to move into that. And if we don't focus on those skills as part of the solution as well, we're really not going to get to a place where we're going to uncover a talented group of folks. And I think that's the piece that's really risky. This invisible population is a population that has really different skills, that has different solutions, that has a way to bring something that we all really need. So to think about it as not a place of focus is going to be hugely detrimental to our society, to our economics. And we keep making these solutions, right, that are focusing on this top percent, right? And we have to make this shift. And because we all will get affected by that now. Actually, we're all getting affected by it now. It was not even eventually anymore. So yeah, we need to focus on solutions that include absolutely everybody and deal with the problems.
I would love to just chime in here. Lydia, there was so much you talked about in terms of like getting the good definitions of these skills right. And Sarah, when you talk about invisible populations and so forth, I want to share some research that we did a couple of years ago, that it was one of those research projects that we set off expecting something else came back. And when it came back, we were like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it was research on this concept of creating an inclusive future of work. And, we started with some hypotheses that like, well, people just don't know where to get the training, and they just don't know, how to create their CVs or where they're going. And what we came back with, if you kind of look across the 4 stages here, right, this concept of imagine what you could be, then go get the training, then go get the experience and so forth. It wasn't step 2, 3, or 4 that was the biggest gap. It was step 1. It was this concept of even envisioning where I could go based on where I am. Very, things that we might think of as simple as being able to explain your own skills, or even think about how those skills are, adjacent to other skills, right? Being able to say, look, you're a cashier here. That means that you are dealing with customers and service and communication, and you've actually got some critical thinking skills, because not everything goes right every day, with the machine or the technology that you're working on. Just peeling that back and helping people to understand the skills they have and how that translates into, what might look a little different on a job description, but it's actually very, very closely related, was a huge, huge opportunity. And I think is still our biggest opportunity, Sarah, similar to what you're saying in terms of, how do we stop focusing on the solutions for just, the top 1 to 5% and really think about the broader population.
Yeah, and I just want to support this whole piece, right? You cannot be what you cannot see. If there's no visibility, the visibility goes both ways. If they can't see an option or there's no interest to actually start building towards, and you need to start building your skill sets and these pathways very, very early on. And the earlier we can get visibility, the earlier we can get people to start to think about, I can be that, or I know what that looks like, or I know how to build towards there, the more we're going to be able to do earlier.
Fantastic, thank you. And I'm glad we sort of ended up on that question, in fact, of where to start. Part of the question you were asking there, Alison, part of the research you were sharing is actually we probably have to start a lot earlier than we think in terms of the journey of supporting individuals in this category. You all knew I was going to force the conversation back to K-12 at some point, because that's sort of my background and my passion space. But I do want to maybe come back to Lydia and Sarah with you both, because what's fascinating also about your roles and of course ETS is that you operate very much across the stages of learner into that sort of early employer category. And so I'll ask you all a question really, which is sort of how early do we start? The answer is probably K-12, but sort of how to go about doing that. And in fact, coming a little bit back to sort of our product thinker here, Sarah, with a much younger audience, admittedly perhaps a different sort of set of challenges than what you were identifying there, Alison, but certainly one of my experiences is that a lot of these 14, 15-year-olds, they're learning the language of how to articulate what they're looking for and what their own strengths are. And so again, I think it's a very reminiscent conversation of the one around these invisible populations in some sense, because you're having to teach the conversation around framing skills and interests and ambitions alongside being able to design architecture that allows for more informed decisions for that demographic. So maybe I'll come first to you, Sarah, with your sort of product leader hat on, which is how early do you think we need to start to really change the way that this industry operates at scale, and how to do that with a demographic that is within the K-12 environment, sort of operating across that segment, but also with such a young age of learner.
Yeah, so I think there's so much we can do to be starting as early as possible, and I think there are a number of ways to think about it, but the 2 ways I would start with. One is the context of why you're learning certain skills and how you'd be able to apply them, to start really thinking about, it's not what I'm not getting a job, but I'm getting these skills that can help me do so many different things and understand why they're learning. The other piece is the learning how to learn piece, right? And I think as we're moving forward, instead of thinking about we're getting to a place where this is the end, right? This is the place where we're starting. We're on this constant journey. We're on this place. We're on these pathways. So learning how to learn has to be a hugely important piece. And to start that mindset with students at the youngest age possible, learning isn't something that stops. Learning is something that you need to really think about how you're going to do it and how you're going to drive it, and how you can really also show employers or teachers or whomever, these are the things that I need as a learner, and this is how I'm going to approach things moving forward.
I need to have you all over for dinner at my house to say this in front of my 5 teenagers, because they all think this is just me saying these things, right? So I couldn't agree with you more from the personal side. I'm watching teenagers, 13, 14, 15-year-olds asking themselves these questions, and that what you just said so resonates with me, Sarah, in terms of just like looking at starting at a much younger population.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in here to your question, Lucy, on how early should we start. I would say as early as possible, given the AI development and technological advancements. We just don't have a set of knowledge that we can hold on to forever. We'll have to embrace the concept of being a lifelong learner. So it's really critical for our young people, like even kids, to understand they need to constantly learn and to develop the skills that are important in playrooms, classrooms, and boardrooms later. But I also want to stress the importance for us as the organizations who provide the products and service to think about the needs of all learners, all students, or people we're trying to serve. Recently, we embarked on a research agenda that's really on creating assessment and products that are culturally responsive. We need to factor in our learners and target users' cultural language and social cultural backgrounds, because it's very important we don't use this one-size-fits-all solution to address all the issues we're seeing at school or in the workplace. It's very critical we consider the diversity and be very responsive to that. Another thing I want to mention is really the wraparound support system, because we have a lot of individuals, as Sarah and Allison alluded to earlier, who are struggling with finding out what they want to do and their awareness. So it's critical we provide that platform so they are aware of the information and the different pathways. We've done a lot of research to study high school students' decision-making going into CTE programs, and if they decide to go into CTE, what are the concentrations they want to major in? All those would have very significant impact on their future career path and their earning power, and which we many times found that they're not fully informed. Usually they talk to a couple of people they know, and that's how the decision was made. And there is definitely a lot more information that they should consult and rely on when they make such important decisions. So that's why we are trying very hard to disseminate our research to a wider and broader audience so more people can benefit from the research findings. And I think it's also important for our educational providers to really think about how to link the individual needs with the employment requirements, so there is the smooth transition for individuals to move into the workplace.
Fantastic, thanks, Lydia. And just one more thing to add, if I may. I think I agree with everything you said, and BridgeU, we work with that demographic of 14 to 17-year-olds, globally across 123 countries. And I think one of the other, just in support of what you were saying, I think one of the other key things there is also that the kind of K-12 layer, that infrastructure also recognizes and adopts a viewpoint that it is so critical to start, maybe even as early as middle school, with educating students about careers, job families, and what the links are between what those students are doing in high school and what that might mean for the futures that may materialize as a result. So I think comes back a little bit to your point, Sarah, at the beginning, that these are multi-stakeholder challenges, and you need to have buy-in from across a variety of different stakeholders, particularly with a very young stage of learner, because they need to be they need to have that message reinforced that it's as important as doing your homework, actually assessing and understanding your skills, you know, what that's leading to, and what opportunities that may open up. So we have a few more minutes left, and I thought, you know, given this is a conference that's fundamentally about innovation, that we would come back to a topic that each of you have really kind of touched on, which is this question of sort of what the future looks like, and what role technology and sort of platforms and innovation might play in driving this revolution further. You mentioned, Allison, that a lot of innovation has happened, but from your perspective, we're not quite there yet. I'd love to understand a little bit more what you mean by that. And so, and then Lydia, of course, you touched on artificial intelligence and the sort of continued research efforts that are underway at ETS. I'd really love to hear from each of you about innovation, technology, and sort of what you think is important to solve existing problems that exist, but also where you think that the potential might be, if you're a big believer that, as you say, Allison, we will get there eventually. Let's start with you, Allison. We will definitely get there. So two thoughts. One, as I mentioned before, something we call learning guidance at Accenture. I'm sure there's a better, broader industry term for it, but that is about helping people find what they need as quickly and as efficiently as possible. It isn't about dumping people into a catalog of 76 different options. And let's be, to be completely honest, right, the content marketplace out there for professional learners is really crowded. So helping someone who wants to learn something, develop a skill, whether it's a power skill, a technical skill, something in between, the quicker and the easier we can make it for that person to be able to describe what they need and have the technology, have the matching engines, have the continuous learning on the machine learning side, help them get there, all the better. The other piece that I would say, which also falls into the category of not yet there, but getting there, is the power of virtual reality for learning, particularly for these power skills, giving people a safe space to practice things like difficult conversations, managing conflict, working with people in different backgrounds, ethnicities, races, and so forth. The power there for virtual reality is huge. We're stepping into that in a big way at Accenture this year, and I'm super excited to see where this is going to go from here. Fantastic. Sarah, what are your thoughts?
So I think where we're going to also see a lot of innovation is going to be around the data piece of this as well, right? We're going to need the data to help figure out within the platforms, how do you get to that next step? How do you actually judge whether someone is at the point where they can go to the next step? And how do the users get to the point where they actually are craving that information to say, this is where I am now, and this is where I want to get to. But in order to do that, we are going to have to think about as a culture, as a system, right? How do we ethically really use this data, make it portable, make sure it's doing the right thing and not the wrong thing? And that's something we really are going to have to come together as stakeholders and really understand how to do. But agree, I think we are going to do this, and I'm very excited to see the next steps.
Yeah, and I would just add that I think there's no doubt that AI has profoundly changed our work and life, and will continue to do so, perhaps at an accelerated pace. I was reading a McKinsey Global Institute report that predicts that by 2030, up to 25% of the global workforce will have to switch occupational categories. AI is really driving a lot of the changes, and some of the low cognitive, repetitive, and physical tasks will be replaced. And it's really the higher order human interaction, creativity, collaboration are likely to stay. But I think when we think about the impact of AI, we need to understand AI doesn't just take away jobs. It also creates new jobs. For example, when we go to a grocery shop and we see a lot more self-checkout kiosks these days, which means fewer cashiers, but workers are being trained to roam the floor and answer questions. improving customers' experience. And some of them have moved to fulfillment centers to respond to the customers' preference for online shopping. So new roles are being created while AI is also taking away some of the positions. And it goes back to what we discussed earlier, that it's really important for employers to help anticipate what skills the industry might be needing and their company might be needing in 2, 3, 5, even 10 years, and start offering training as early as they could, so they can help build a future that's sustainable for their employees. And then on the employee side, it's really important we realize that we all need to learn. We need to stay flexible and be agile, and to think about the journey as a lifelong learning journey.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Lydia. And that, that rounds us off for today's session. I think if there's one thing I think we have agreed, I think we agree on a lot, but I certainly want to sort of draw out this initial question, which is it's clear to me at least that sort of that foundation of learning, the skill of learning itself, is one of the ways to future-proof the sort of changes in requirement across skills and across career categories, and that's something that a variety of stakeholders should collaborate around, ensuring that that's true across the spectrum of learners and employees. So Lydia, Sarah, Allison, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute joy hearing from each of you and absorbing nuggets of your wisdom. So thank you very much, and thank you to ASU and GSV for having this wonderful panel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.